Hey there. Before you are about to dive into one of the episodes from our maternal mental health series, make sure that you have subscribed to our podcast on Spotify, the podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, we would appreciate if you spread the word and recommend or even forward this episode or the whole podcast in general to another parent or to anyone who you think should be listening to this. If you find yourself asking, how can you support us? The easiest way to do this is to give us a follow on Instagram at Damn Parenting Podcast and to rate us with 5 stars on the platform that you're listening to this. We hope you know you're not alone on this parenting journey and you enjoy the following episode. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Damn Parenting, your English-speaking parenting podcast from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. As always, we are your hosts, Eva and
Maren.
Today, we welcome back on our resident psychologist, Dr. Naomi Gibson. Good morning,
Hello.
Naomi.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. On today's topic, we are going to be discussing loneliness in motherhood. Feeling anxious and trying to be that perfect parent can really result in us feeling very lonely. Our international community here in the Netherlands, we're doing our best to help all our parents in our community connect through events or spaces or meetup, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. I mean, we're really coming out of the woodwork, I think, in the last few years with anything and everything we can do to showcase what's available and who's out there. Even people who might be down the road that you wouldn't have thought of or known about, they might turn up to a space, is there for people to start connecting. Isolation and loneliness in new parents. So after childbirth, technically you're never alone, but you can be lonely, and that's the result of it. And with this loneliness comes guilt, but also it can be a wonderful experience, but also can be feelings of the guilt with the isolation as well, that you might be trapping yourself at home with the baby. And then there's everything that might contribute to that. So this is going to be linked matricence that we spoke to Elaine about in April. A few stats just to kick this off. About 52% of new parents feel both lonely and socially isolated. It's also a case of the increased usage of social media reports higher loneliness. And we all know when we're trapped at home, baby's asleep, we're doom scrolling away. So please be aware of that. The lack of community as a new mom contributes also to loneliness. Hence, we were talking about all these events that are coming out of the woodworks in the last few years, which have really started helping a lot in our international community, and being unable to share the struggles because we fear people are going to critique our parenting. We've spoken, I think, previously with you, Naomi, about how we're here in the Netherlands and we're more open to different cultures and how people parent. There's the whole gentle parenting wave, and we're all trying to do something new here in this era. But when we go back home, we go back to our friends and family who are in their home base, and they probably stick to the same old parenting styles that we might have been raised with, or they're not really open to the gentle parenting. So there is that also struggle that we might have sharing, like, I'm trying Montessori, so my little one's going to help out with everything. And if we go home, friends and family might be like, just get them to do this. Just rush them. Just hurry up. Why are you giving them such independence? Why are you giving them such time? So there's a lot of aspects there. And finally, breastfeeding and sleep are two of the major things contributing to loneliness as a new mother. So with all of this wrapping up here, it's quite a lot that impacts us here as parents, as mothers. Let's start the ball rolling, I guess. So Naomi, can you explain to us then about this whole loneliness aspect in parenthood that isn't the same as it would be in maidenhood as it would be?
Loneliness as a sort of a definition is about isolation, but wanting social connection. So a feeling of like wanting to get close to people or wanting to literally be around people, but there being a sense of isolation. And that might be literally a sense of isolation, like being at home with your baby or being out of your country and culture that you were from, or it could be a sort of felt sense of isolation. So feeling like you can't connect to people, you can't find your people that you know and like and want to be with. And there's far more opportunities for that in new parenthood than there would have been perhaps as a young person working in an office where there's lots of people around and you can find the people that you like and want to spend time with and connect to. So it's kind of a perfect storm of chances to feel lonely or opportunities to feel lonely in new parenthood. Yeah, there might also be a sense of perhaps disconnection from friends or people from your old life, your pre-baby life, which is a little bit what you were talking about, Eva, of just doing something different, being in a new state, to being in a new kind of time of your life that is kind of separate from friends and not knowing how to kind of connect to your old friends and your old life in a way that feels meaningful now you've had a baby. And you're both nodding, so I imagine that has been a sort of transition for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And also it popped up in moments that I wouldn't have expected it, where I thought in the past I was fine in these moments on holidays, especially when I felt isolated from my family back home, but then also in daily life when you are so occupied and you're so busy, but then you sit down in these moments and then you just feel so disconnected from the outside, and you just feel so disconnected from everything other than your baby, because you're so this bond is so strong, and this is such an intense contact physically and also emotionally that you kind of want to get something else and a break from it, but you just can't imagine how should connect with anyone else in that moment. And then for me, it was always like a pathway then to I have this feeling of loneliness, and then when you realize you're being lonely and you realize you feel alone, although you're so you almost feel like this is not real, because you see, oh, I'm literally not alone and I'm literally in contact with all these people, but then it's more of like a practical connection. It's not like this friendship connection or this I'm talking about my emotions, I'm talking about my fears, I'm talking about my anxiety. And then I started having these conversations with myself, and like, how good is it, like blind leading the blind then in this? And then you feel all of a sudden you start doubting your decisions, and you start feeling guilty, and you start feeling all like it's like this really like pathway and slippery slope towards other mental health issues then when you are in this bubble of loneliness and disconnect. And also what I found, I felt lonely in the outside, but also a little lost within myself. And I felt like lonely in myself, where I thought I'm developing this new persona, I'm developing this new character, this mother, and going through the whole process of matrescence. And I also felt very little things within myself that I could connect to from my old life, because then I thought, oh, well, this trait in my personality, I can't live it right now. And this trait in my personality doesn't have space right now. So I also felt within my inner team, I felt like this new mother persona was standing on the outside looking towards my other personality traits. And they were like, hey, we're having fun over here. And this person was like, I don't know. I don't even know how I look like yet. I don't even know how I play out yet. I'm just here. Can someone come over? Maybe the courageous part or maybe the spontaneous part. So yeah, that was these two parts of loneliness within myself and then also within the outside world. I hope this makes sense now, what I said, but
yeah, I think it does make sense.
Draw this picture.
Hit the nail on the head that you can sometimes be practically alone and lonely, even if you're with your baby, which is it's very actively with somebody a lot of the time. But yeah, also kind of just getting to know this new role can feel lonely in itself. It's new, it's demanding, it's scary perhaps, it's learning about yourself. Yeah, and that can all add up to a feeling of loneliness.
And we say that this also goes into toddlerhood as well. We're not referring just to babies. We actually are also going into toddlers as well. And even as children grow up and they start school and we have now more time and we're now coming home to an empty home in the morning and going, oh, now what?
Especially if you're a parent or a mother that's given everything at a great cost to your bringing up your child, which, you know, I talk about a lot, sort of not losing yourself in the experience and not kind of martyring yourself perhaps to the motherhood experience. If you have had a tendency to do that, then yeah, when your child does move on and their independence kind of string between you gets longer as they go to school and daycare and stuff, then that can feel really like, who am I now? What's my purpose here if I'm not looking after this child? I had a experience just yesterday in one of Amsterdam's lovely play cafes, the Club Abbey. If you've been there, it was loads of parents, loads of kids. I was with almost 3-year-old, and I was actually taking a moment with a coffee whilst he was playing to think about this podcast and think about loneliness. And maybe it was because I was thinking about it, maybe it was just the stark realization there's loads of parents here. Everybody's just like either entertaining their kid with a coffee, staring into space, playing on their phone, whatever. And I was like, do you know what? This is really lonely. I'm feeling a bit lonely here, even though there's tons of people in the same boat, literally kind of being with their kids. And yeah, I was thinking, what do I need to feel less lonely? And I sort of, when I got my next coffee, did a little bit of a chit chat with the girl serving the coffee. I text my friend back. I've been like putting off for a few days. Just these like small actions of being like, okay, now I feel kind of connected to this immediate world and my greater kind of resources. But I think the moments like that can happen all the time in parenthood. Be like, I'm so busy. I'm so surrounded by people. My children are noisy and very much there. And why do I feel so lonely and alone?
Yeah, I've definitely had that moment where I've been in a space with my daughter and I look around and I'm kind of like, can I get to talk to an adult? And the thing is, because obviously we're internationals, obviously a lot of people are going to be Dutch here, obviously. But it's just that thing that you're like, I don't know who I can go to. Whereas if we're back in our homelands, you're more likely to be able to just walk up to anyone and start having your cultural isms, you know, that you're able to start chatting away. But yeah, I struggle with that as well because I'm like, oh, if I go up, for example, yesterday I had a play date and it was with a child from daycare and the family are just fully Dutch and to the point that there's no English exchanged at all between us. So I have to do everything in Dutch. And I feel just so, I'm doing this for my daughter. Like when you talked about martyrdom, I was like, oh God, is that me? But I was doing the play date in Dutch, like, so all the conversation with the mother was in Dutch. And all I could think of was like, you know, it's not that it sucks. I'm doing this for my daughter, but at the same time, I'm like, I also need a little connection. And so when you're in a space with so many other people, I'm afraid that it's going to be the same thing where I'm going to have to talk Dutch or I don't know. There's just all this, you know, you never know. And there's never contentment and there's never peace at it because you're not like, I know I can just walk in here and start speaking English or Irish to people. Like, I know I can do this. I don't get that comfort here because I'm an international.
It's so much more complicated and there's so many more opportunities for loneliness. I think in that example that you just get, what can kind of sort of dilute that feeling of loneliness perhaps is, yeah, in that moment, you're at the play date, it's all Dutch. You've got to get in there, get stuck in, do what you need to do. And then maybe afterwards, there's moments to connect to your partner or a friend or something that feels kind of more easily soothing and comfortable. And that's probably going to be in your own language or whatever. So just kind of, it's not to never go and do those challenging things because they might make you feel lonely, but what do you also need to balance it out a bit? And there's some research on loneliness, particularly in expats, the research called in around the world. And one kind of protective factor against loneliness was having consistent and meaningful relationships with your extended family, wherever they are, which you would probably naturally do, you know, arrange a FaceTime or email or, you know, yeah, having those kind of moments of connection with people who just kind of perhaps understand you, they speak the same language, all those things kind of feel easier. And what I see as an added kind of layer of complication, particularly I see this in therapy with international families, is that there is often a reason why, and that might be an unconscious or a conscious reason why you've moved away from your family of origin or the place where you grew up. That might have been for, you know, other opportunities and economic means, but there's something that sometimes feels a bit complicated about family relationships back home. So that I think can add to the loneliness if it's protective that you speak to those people and have those conversations, but it also feels kind of challenging or tricky or doesn't make you feel good or can add to your loneliness. It's just kind of, perhaps it's just a bit more difficult.
It's actually really interesting.
I found also very interesting to watch myself with, and I've had this made me think of, because I had an experience yesterday and then made me think about that. We are so in physical contact, especially in the beginning of motherhood when you're like have your baby on you, with you the whole time, but then also when your toddler constantly wants to be on you. You have this, on the one side, this feeling of being overtouched. So you don't want then at one point anyone to touch you, like even my partner, then like, give me space. But then at one point you realize, oh, I am overtouched with this children's touch, but I haven't gotten a big warm hug in a long time. And that made me feel then very lonely because I was like so averse of being like, I need my space, please no one touch me, that I also said no to these opportunities of the hug. And then I felt so empty at one point where I was like, what do I need? I'm like, there's people here, my husband's here, but then I needed this physical connection. I said, I just need now a warm hug again too. And I need this physical connection. And then that made me feel less lonely. But realizing that because you're constantly so overstimulated that you don't think, oh, I want a hug now to feel less lonely, because you can't even think of someone else touching you at this moment, but then distinguishing what is the difference in these touches. I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah.
but like this being held by someone else just popped into my head then when I was really asking myself, why am I feeling so disconnected? Why am I feeling so lonely? Why am I feeling so isolated? Because I'm not in physical, like positive physical contact with someone I love, with someone who can recharge my battery. And I'm constantly in this giving mode of that with my child, and they give it back to me, yes. And it's nice when my daughter hugs me and all that. But it is a difference if my husband like really bear hugs me and like recharges my battery. Yeah, so that was one interesting thing that I noticed. This also, yeah, dissonance of being overstimulated, over touched, but then this need for this warm, recharging hug and touch, or stroking your back, or these kind of things.
Yeah, and sometimes that can come from connection with other people, requesting a hug or not saying no. And I think oftentimes it starts with the connection to yourself as well. So yeah, there's lots of research on how warm, loving touch for yourself is really important. So things like taking your time to wash your hair and moisturize your body and do like kind of grooming tasks, but with a kind of gentle compassion that you would, when you're sort of drying off your child after they come out of the bath, you're like, you're thinking about it with yourself. I can walk around the house kind of dripping, onto the next thing, trying to do 10 things at once. But actually, when I slow down, I'm like, no, I'm going to put moisturizer on now because it feels nice. And it's a kind of a real kind of sensory soothing connection. I think small things like that can really affect how connected you feel to yourself, and then how connected you feel to your greater world and relationships, influencing how lonely you feel.
Something I actually wanted to ask about was the loneliness. So how do we class loneliness? Is it like a physical, or is it an emotional? Is it both?
It's both. Absolutely. I mean, if you look back to times when you felt lonely, it might be because there's a sense of not belonging or something kind of more emotional, or it might be sort of this abstract feeling of like, oh, I just haven't like met anybody on the same page for a while. And then there's also the physical, not being around people, or being around people a lot, but not actually connecting to them. So yeah, it's absolutely both.
Because I think, I'm going to make a general assumption here for anyone who's listening, is going to be the phrase, am I the only one? Am I the only one who feels this lonely? Am I the only one who doesn't want to go out? Am I the only one who doesn't want to go to these amazing events that are happening, but I can't do it? Am I the only one?
Yeah, and just how isolating that can be if you think that. And something that I also think is important to mention is in parenting in a different way to the kind of the norm, in the sense of, what if you're parenting a child with additional needs, or a neurodivergent child, or, twins, even something that's kind of not standard child in a sense. And I know from parents that I work with that can feel really lonely, of like, yeah, am I the only one? Do people understand me? Do people understand that my kid can't go to this party because they're super allergic to peanuts and it's really worrying, or whatever these, worries and fears tend to be, they can be really isolating. Yeah, practically, you're having to attend appointments and you have other people around or things for your child. And maybe, the regular folks at the daycare don't quite understand that, and how kind of isolating and lonely that can be. What if you're a solo parent? What if you're doing parenting on your own? Practically you've not got another adult perhaps in the house to share the joys and the challenges with. And perhaps it also feels really lonely if you go to other families' homes where there's two parents. These sorts of things, it all just kind of adds to you've got the loneliness bucket where you're perhaps just putting other things, all these sort of factors in that can add to making you feel lonely.
Yeah, I guess, you're bringing in a lot of extra layers that I actually hadn't thought about. You were just saying there about like the twins, or the solo parenting, or a neurodivergent child. Those are definitely aspects that will have a massive and compounded effect, I'm sure, on a parent on their journey. And as we have already highlighted in a couple of our episodes, we have spaces that are, growing and coming out here in the Netherlands, to support our international community. Because in our search for episodes in general on damn parenting, a lot of the time the questions we'll ask to the spaces that are providing help for whatever it might be it dentistry or mental health or whatever it might be, we always say, do you have something, in English? Do you have, are these services, are there spaces we can go to in English? And a lot of the time it will be no. there's that aspect of kind of trying to, our international community themselves are the ones who are creating these spaces for us to go to. So it mightn't be available for you now, but hopefully something will be created for you if you are needing something. And equally, a lot of us have created spaces because it wasn't there. Like the podcast wasn't there. So we were like, well, someone's got to do it. We have no experience. Let's just try it, you know? Or, you know, Gemma with Mama Social, she's like, I really needed this. And, you know, okay, I'm going to do it. You know, we're all going out there and we're all just trying whatever we can right now.
But it takes a lot of bravery and a certain amount of privilege in terms of time and access to these things. And actually, if you're really experiencing loneliness, it can feel quite stuck of just like, I can't see the wood for the trees. I don't know how to get out of this. Or, you know, there's no way that I could take my child to X play group. It would be too much for us to do. So yeah, it's about, I guess, having access to those things and also the sort of oomph and the courage and the ability to get there or to make it if you see there's something that needs to be made.
Yeah, I'm also going to throw something contradictive in here, and I know I'm contradicting myself, but I hear this whole creating space for the international community and like doing all this stuff in English. But I think also we need to be very mindful with this to not isolate ourselves within the greater picture then, because this is something that I have also noticed that we are in a different culture, we are in a different country. And I mean, of course, this depends on, are you here for, you know, you're going to be here for 2 years or a year or whatever. Like, are you here? You already know it's limited. So you might not have the motivation to really indulge into the country, the culture that you're living in. But for me, I know I'm here for the foreseeable future and I'm not planning to leave. So I also have to grab myself on my own nose and be like, yeah, I mean, there is a certain grace period where you can get away with this. I'm in my expat bubble. However, if I know that if I keep doing this, then I will never feel connected here. I will never feel connected to the neighborhood. I will never have this chit chat with my neighbors. I won't create it because I'm not going out there and putting myself into this unknown and into this painful process of learning the language or learning the culture. So I also see that with myself. And like I said, I'm the best example for this, that it is hard, but really trying to maybe also, if you don't speak the language yet, or you don't have capacity to learn it or whatever, there's plenty of opportunities to still be part of the community. You can, I don't know, there's a neighborhood centrum here around the corner, and I could go there and be like, hey, do you need someone to cook the soup for this meeting, or do you need someone to clean up, or do you need like something that doesn't involve particularly speaking in the language but still connecting and still being seen and still being part. And then you will eventually pick up these little phrases, you will eventually pick it up, and it makes language learning easier, of course, if you are surrounded with it and if you are thrown into it and you cannot escape into English. So I do want to bring this in because I have experienced this with myself, and I noticed when I even was signing up for school, if I would be in Germany, I'm the first one. Where's the parents committee? I want to be involved. I want to be like in this. I want to have a say. I want to put myself in it. And here I didn't, because I thought, oh God, it's all in Dutch. Like my Dutch is not to the stand. But then I'm already creating this isolation. And school hasn't even started yet. So I said, no, I still have to do it. They will be patient with me. I can be patient with my Dutch. I can be patient with all this, but I cannot let myself stop here. Like, I cannot stop myself because of this language barrier. So I do just want to throw this in there, and also being honest that I haven't done this to the extent that I should have, but I see this and I want to change this. Like, that's my goal for this year, to really, if I decided to live here, I really want to be part of the community. I want to be part of the Dutch culture here also. So that is, just the slippery slope and the balance that I think we need to find as expats, to be connected with the international community and with the cultures within that, but also see that we are in an environment that I personally also want to connect to.
Yeah, and then in doing that, you're kind of preventing loneliness in a sense of just being like, how can I intentionally, in a way that feels right, step into this other culture? And, you know, what I really liked is you seem really you've got some grace with yourself, just being like, this is what I want not, but I know I'm only at this certain level, and how can I still do it, still step into it, have that kind of courageous step. I did the same. I'm the one of the class elders in my daughter's class, and that actually came from an experience of loneliness in the first term, of being like, this is so new, this is kind of confronting lots of things for me. What do I need to actively do? I need to be brave, and I need to kind of learn about this school culture and get in there and speak Dutch, and it's fine, it's good. It feels less isolating, where another, if it's a fork in the road, the other road could have been, nah, I can't do this, it's too much, no one's going to understand me, I'm never going to get this. And that, I think, would have led to loneliness.
But that will also be for people who are only here for those contracts that are maybe 4 years or 5 years, or... For
sure. You've obviously got to take in your individual circumstances and kind of do whatever it means to you to kind of get a sense of belonging and reduce the loneliness.
One of the things in the early years with baby, for example, is culturally, our cultures are all going to be different. And I remember hearing about, I can't remember, some Asian country where if a mother gives birth, she goes to this tent on the side of the village. And that's where all the other women come and they take care of the woman. They bring the food to the woman. They really share the wisdom. They do everything for that woman because that's how it's done there. Now, if we look back to more westernized countries, maybe for the majority of us, food is usually brought, or people come over to help clean up, or maybe take out your other child to take care of it. There are different cultural ways that we will take care of someone who has a baby. And as an international family here, we don't really have that. Either we don't have the space to host our friends or family to come over during those periods, but equally, who wants to have their friends or family staying in our home when we're going through this period of children or babies or whatever, toddlers even. So on a cultural aspect, sometimes surrounded by our family members can actually make it more difficult. And also being here in the Netherlands is we kind of expect something, but we're not going to get it here as well, if you know what I mean. We would expect, I had a client who mentioned a food train. That's very normal. She's from America, and it's very normal, where she was like, yeah, is there a way to organize a food train? And I was thinking, yeah, that's really normal. When we're back home, you'll be maybe with a bunch of other mothers, and they're all kind of going to give birth maybe around the same time, so they can all prep food to drop it around once you've had your baby, and you repay that. But here, culturally, that's really hard to figure out with so many different expats living all over the city or even over the country. And so culturally, the isolation is, as Maren was saying, is if you start learning the Dutch language, you can help yourself integrate here. But equally, we're such a mesh of cultures here as well, of trying to figure out how can I stick to my own, as it would be going, hey, I want to create a food train. And then other people going, oh yeah, that's what we do, we'll join that. Instead of other people going, well, that's not my thing. So it's trying to figure out ways to help each other in those moments of, when you're alone with the baby, how can we then provide you what you need from your culture, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Moving on to the next element, I guess, of loneliness would be anxiety. For example, as we said, so we're living away. So some people will feel the obligation to rush home to show that baby, because obviously they can't have everyone coming over here. So it might be easier for them to go home with the baby. But sometimes we're not ready. And then the anxiety then can start building up of that aspect, because you feel lonely that I don't get to share this with my family back home. So you then put pressure on yourself to then go home with a small baby, maybe, to show everyone.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite a lot of people's experience. And yeah, just thinking about when you said anxiety, it made me think about the loneliness of experiencing mental health problems in general, but in motherhood specifically. What if you're really struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety or lots of kind of overwhelm in these moments, and you can feel really isolated, either because of the mental health state. If you're feeling low in mood, it's likely that you don't want to go out and connect and meet new people. You might want to just sort of stay close to home and sort of make your life a little smaller in those moments. But then that is a kind of a vicious cycle for loneliness as well. And also the loneliness of maybe people not understanding that mental health struggle, meeting other mums who are perhaps with their baby, who have not had the same experience as you, and they're sort of saying how much they're enjoying it perhaps, or they're feeling happy to return to work or whatever, and you're thinking, oh, this is not how I'm experiencing it at all. Is there something wrong with me? Am I the only one? Am I just feeling kind of really alone with that struggle?
If we then move on to saying, okay, as we heard, about 52% of people are going to suffer from loneliness. As expats, we have quite a lot of extra additional stress and pressures on us, which can build up through their trip here, through the pregnancy, and after having a baby, and it's compounded as well. How can we think about improving our postpartum mental health?
In lots of ways, and just trying to think of how I can make this nice and concrete. So connection to others, connection to yourself. I think connection to others, like what things do feel manageable to do? Does it feel possible to go for a walk with your partner or somebody else who's recently had a baby, or someone from your midwife practice or something? And yeah, you're practically outside, you're perhaps less lonely, but can you also connect on the emotional level? Can you say, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm finding this hard, or I miss my partner because we're in this new phase and it's really hard, sort of being honest and being able to connect. So connection to others, and then connection to yourself. Are there kind of little things that you can do regularly and daily to make you feel that you matter? How do you care for yourself physically, as we were saying before, in terms of little things like moisturizing and taking care of yourself there, but also what are you eating? Are you nourishing your body? Are you moving your body in a way that feels gentle and not punishing? If you've just had a baby, it's probably not the time to start marathon training, but can you do some exercise that feels possible? Yeah, how do you kind of care for your mind and increase connection to yourself? Are there sort of books that you like to read, TV programs that you like, things you want to learn, all these sort of like nourishing little nuggets that make you feel like reminded of your pre-baby self, or reminded of yourself in this matrescence period, that you can kind of connect to this new version in a sort of gentle way that doesn't feel too lonely or isolating? And is there something kind of in this sort of mental looking after yourself that can kind of reduce your sense of loneliness? Are there things that you can have in your environment that kind of feel soothing, like different sensory things, touch and sound and different music and things like that? But is there also, do you need something that's like a regular check-in with your friend, even if she lives in another country? I have a friend who, in those early stages of parenthood, we would just sort of text each other like a kiss every so often, every day sometimes, to just be like, I've got you in my mind. I'm thinking of you. I know you're busy right now, but you're there. And that was really kind of a connection to myself, but also connection to others, of just feeling like, okay, I'm not too lonely. I might feel lonely at times, but there's people that care for me. And also, crucially, I care for myself.
One thing that I found so powerful is, and that might sound strange because we are always, that comes back to being in the bathroom, being like the self-care routine, blah, 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 that whole thing. But one thing that we rarely do is look at ourselves in the mirror and look ourselves in the eyes and having talk with ourselves, because we are the mirror, but then our eyes, like the hair and this, like we pay attention to something else. But what I started doing is stand in front of the mirror, look myself in the eye, and have a pep talk with myself. Like, hi, Maren, you're doing okay. This is what's going to happen today. You're able to do it. Like, I am coaching myself in the mirror. And that was so powerful. Like, really, I felt like someone else was giving this talk to me, and I felt seen, and I felt so connected with myself. And I said, you are strong. You can do this, and really connect with yourself in the mirror. And that was so powerful. And I started doing this and really, talking to myself and looking myself in the eye. It's such a little thing, but it had such an impact on me and my connecting with myself, and this showering myself with these affirmations. It was more powerful than writing them down. Really look myself in the eye, and this is you. I see you. You are doing a good job, and you are loved, and you're not alone.
Yeah, I'm glad that you found that. It sounds like it's really helpful. And for somebody else, that might be too much. That could be far out of their zone of comfort. And actually, what they might need is a sort of the flavor of that, but less of that. So whatever works for you, and being kind of brave to try different things out, and to sort of, I think if loneliness were on one side of the scale, then I think sort of bravery and courage is on the other, and having to sort of balance them out. Because if you're feeling lonely, you're likely going to have to step into a new zone. You might be feeling lonely because your child's got additional needs. Okay, a bravery piece is, I'm going to have to look on Facebook groups for people who have also got this thing going on with them, and then maybe I'm going to have to meet them, and sort of gently the scales can balance to be, reduce the loneliness.
So when you're talking about bravery, I think everyone should know out there that sometimes when you see people saying, hey, I'm living in Western Park, does anyone want to go for a walk? That takes bravery. And it's also a case of you can do that too, wherever you're living. Honestly, half the time it's just a number. No one even knows who you are, and it's just like, just put it out there, just do that. Because that's actually how myself and Maren met, was someone was like, hey, I'm pregnant in the summer. It was COVID. Can we somehow meet up? And we ended up, I think 15, 20 of us meeting in a park. COVID regulations, of course, safe distancing. But it does take that guts just to kind of be like, okay. And with the nervousness is a case of, I don't know who I'm going to meet, but it's a case of, as you say, the bravery of just send out the text. And if no one responds to you, that's okay, because you know what, there's another 20, 30, 40 texts coming after you, maybe within the same hour. So you can do it again, maybe not that day, maybe wait another day. But I think that sometimes holds people back, is because people see all these texts coming through and they might get overwhelmed with oh, it's too busy, or, oh, no one reached out to me. And then that might shut them down as well into the loneliness even further, where they feel everyone else might be meeting up with other people in different areas of the city. So anyone listening, do give it a try. And if no one responds to you, just put it out again a day or two later, because the floods of messages that come on our WhatsApp groups can be a bit overwhelming. We're going to wrap this up here, but I would like to ask you, are there any suggestions for resources of support that you would say, hey, consider this, look into this, providing any links here on the show notes?
I always come back to self-compassion. It's like the framework with which I do so much stuff. And I think there's probably a link to some sort of pointers in terms of self-compassionate ways of approaching this. Like, how can you be kind to yourself whilst experiencing loneliness? How can you make loneliness less likely by being kind to yourself?
Well, we're going to end it here. Thank you so much, Naomi, for joining us again, and especially on this important month of maternal mental health. Hopefully all these contributions from all these professionals that are being hosted on the show are going to be of some use to you or someone you may know. Thank you.